All right, so we will dive into ethical considerations. I'm pretty sure most of you guys have heard about ethics when it comes to conducting research. So why ethics? Ethics is supposed to be guidelines and principles that help researchers hold up values when it comes to the quality of their research and the importance that the research is for society. So before the 1900s, uh, there were not many people talk about ethics, right? So ethic was just, we don't know much about it, so why should we pay attention to it? So I'm pretty sure most of you guys, all of you guys took what history back in high school, perhaps, and especially World War One or maybe World War Two history. So if you guys remember back then, if we go back to specifically World War Two, how Nazis were implementing a lot of research on human beings, change the color of the eyes, color of skin, maybe make them quicker, faster soldiers, but they were conducting research on human beings, right? So in the 1900s, we didn't really pay attention to ethics. And there are three areas when it comes to talking about ethical considerations. Number one is treatment of subjects, two is professional issues, and the third one is science and society. So treatment of subjects, pretty much saying that, hey, subjects should not be harmed during study. Humans have rights. And if you do not, uphold the values of humans, and then research might be a result of distrust in science and could be ignored. When it comes to professional issues, there are guidelines, right? You should practice science and conduct in the conduct of scientists as well. And science and society is pretty much science is not survival free, so principles needed to guide the direction of science. So there has to be something that we researchers must follow in order for us to conduct research. What are some problems with studies is that including some of them include mental states, right? So whenever a researcher wants to implement a study, one of them could be dealing with mental states, might be inducing subjects to perform reprehensible acts, and that might lead to low self-esteem among participants. So back in 1900, researchers were like, okay, so is harm ever justified when it comes to conducting research? Should we even care about that? So this is one quote, right? Say the human subjects emerge from their research experience in harm, and or at least that's the risk or minimal. That the research should be minimal, understood by the participants, and accepted as reasonable. So we have this balance, the cost and benefit ratio, right? If you're gonna do research among participants, there is a cost, right? But at the same time, there has to be a benefit, and the benefit should be greater than the cost. So it should be informed consent. Everything is done to minimize the harm among participants, and the benefit must greatly outweigh the harm. So it is essential to keep that in mind whenever conducting research. So treatment of subjects, harm to participants. I will give you guys an example of what happened back in the 1950s and how this relates to today's topic. So back in the 50s, the CIA sponsored a mind control research project, right? They call it the Operation Midnight Climax. So the purpose of the research was to go and study the effects of LSD. You guys know what LSD is? Have an idea, most of you? So it's a drug. It's a drug that provokes hallucination among people. All right. So they want to study that the effects of this drug on people, and so non-consenting individuals in the Bay Area, in New York, they were actually recruited, and they were lured by CIA paid prostitutes to safe houses where they were given this this drug, and they were monitored behind a glass, right? So, but over the next decade, OMC pretty much was the provided the government with extensive knowledge in topics such as mind-altering drugs, right? How to do mind control. It was a benefit. However, the harm and the non-consent was very dangerous, right? So they pretty much recruited people. Hey, come to this place. They were given a drug, and they were like, all right, let's sit back and see what happens. Study them. So this Operation Midnight Climax shut down back in 1965. But if you can see, it lasted at least 10 years. And it involved the CIA, a very powerful agency, federal agency. Another one is Stanford prison experiment. Have you guys ever heard about this? Yeah, you guys are familiar with that? For those of you who haven't heard about this, so this happened back in 1971. So the purpose of the experiment was to go ahead and study the cause of conflict between prisoners and guards. So people were supposed to, guard the prisoners. So they recruited 24 male students who were randomly assigned to the role of either being a guard or a prisoner. And then they set up according to their role in a specifically designed model prison located in the basement of the psychology building on Stanford's campus. So we're talking about Stanford. It soon became apparent that those who had been given the role of guard were taking their job pretty serious among the other group, right? Those who were supposed to play the prisoner role. So they began enforcing very hard measures, and punishment to the prisoners. And if that's surprising, so it's even more surprising that many of the prisoners in the experiment simply accepted the abuse. So there's this contrast, right? So if there are two groups of people, the experimental group, maybe the control group, but because they were given the power, right, the guards, to go ahead and implement, it's like, you're going to play this role, and prisoner were pretty much following. They were obeying to what role they were playing. So it was pretty much an authoritarian measure adopted by the guards, who became very extreme and only lasted about 6 days. So they started seeing these dramatic changes among the roles that they were playing. How about the Milgram experiment? Have you guys heard about this before? No? So this is back to 1961. Well, it says Nazi. Have you guys ever heard about Adolf Eichmann? Yeah. So he played one of the most important key roles when it came to Nazi Germany. He went to trial for war after World War II for war crimes. But there was this jail psychologist, Stanley Milgram. And he wanted to test, how is it possible that millions of his accomplices in the Holocaust were just following orders? How is it possible that millions of soldiers were like, okay, yeah, we're going to go ahead and exterminate people. And they were okay with it. Put up a rifle and start shooting people. Run them, cast them, whatever method they use. So this psychologist was really intriguing to see, how is it that people obey orders? And he wanted to test that. So to figure that out, Milgram set up an experiment to measure the individual's willingness to obey an authority figure. In the experiment, two participants, one of which was an actor, they were separated into two separate rooms. They could only hear one another. And the test subject read a series of questions to the actor. Each time the actor would answer a question incorrectly, the test subject would just push a button, and it will produce electric shock to the actor. So the important thing here, or the surprising thing, is that every time he will push the button, the person, well, there were times of screams, right? And nearly every single one continued to push the button. But why did he continue to push the button? Why do you think that the other person was okay and seeing the other person getting electrocuted at the same time? Well, he was given the authority, right, to do it. Hey, nothing will happen to you. Just do it. If anything happens to the person, it will be on me. So whoever was pushing the button, well, don't do anything to me. So, might as well do it. Just keep doing it. And this person was just asking the questions, right? And the guy would just, if they would answer wrong, then they would just get electric shocks. So he proved that if someone, right, with an authority, a higher authority, were to recruit a soldier or however you want to call it, and if you give them the authority to do X, Y, and Z, and let them know, hey, nothing will happen to you if you do this, and people will just obey, following the orders. And this would pretty much happen in World War II, right? So, and this was known as the Miller experiment. I'm pretty sure most of you guys have heard about Satsuki, we call it just Satsuki study project, right? Most of raise your hand if you have. Okay, yeah, right. So this took place back in 1932, and it lasted up to 1972. So many years. Was it 32, 42, which is almost 30 years. And this took place in Alabama. Any of you guys have family in Alabama? You guys know where Alabama is, right? Yeah. Okay, I've been to Alabama before. I have my older sister lives in Alabama, actually. It's totally different than California. So this took place in Alabama, and the USPHS, federal government agency, took part in this study, right? And along with the Tuskegee Institute. So the study consisted of 600 African American men. 399 of them had syphilis. They were the experimental group. 201 of them had no syphilis. They were the control group. Two parts of the experiment involved is that initially it was supposed to be a 69 months with treatment following after that. And the modification added a eliminated treatment after 6 to 9 months and prolonged the experiment for several years more. So the participants were unaware of syphilis, right? And they were told that, hey, any treatment that might be going on right now was bad blood. That's what was bad for blood. So incentives for some of the treatments when they were recruiting the participants were like, hey, if you become part of this study, we'll give you a free medical experiment, rights to and from the clinic, you will get meals, and treatment of minor ailments, and free bureau arrangement if in case you passed away. But you guys know that people were just dying, right? So the aim of this study, why they wanted to really conduct the syphilis among African American people, was to go ahead and record the natural history and treat the syphilis among African American people. Right. So there was this doctor named Dr. Clark. So he planned to study the empirical and long-held notion that syphilis affected African American people differently than white people. And there was a study that was conducted back in Oslo, Norway, from 1909 to 1928. And they reported a natural history of bacterial syphilis among white males. So there was this guy in the US saying, hey, I believe that syphilis affects African American people differently. So that was the theory, right? The initial theory when it comes to research. I believe X, Y, and Z. So why not go ahead and conduct study and research among African American people with syphilis? So just to give you guys a timeline, in 1932, the experiment began, right? In 36, there was a major paper out on the experiment that was published, and the study criticized that not knowing if men were being treated or not. So a decision was made to follow the men until death, right? So in 1940, men in study were denied entry to military in order to prevent treatment for syphilis. 1945, penicillin was now accepted as a treatment choice for syphilis. So there was a treatment going on, and they were still studying people, right, without giving a treatment. 47, the rapid treatment centers was available for those with syphilis. In 72, there was the first article that condemned the study, and following to that, the study was pretty much terminated. So what are the ethical dilemmas when it comes to these type of studies? They pretty much didn't act to the benefit of others, especially society, humanity, right? Instead of helping sick patients, they pretty much made matters worse by not treating them and letting people die. So individuals participated in the study only because they were influenced by an outside source, and they pretty much told them what they were going to get if they became part of the study, but they didn't. So these people were dying of natural disease, right? So they were just following them throughout until they died, and they deceived the men to gain their trust, right? So in this case, it was harmful and not helpful at all. Patients were told that they were receiving treatments, and when the syphilis came around, they were not given the treatment that they needed. And the act of not treating patients was itself harmful. Also, we do have the false advertisement to advertising to patients, right? The recruitment process. So there was no informed consent. They did not want participants to know that there will be a autopsy after all. So they were just taking people in, researching them, studying them, following them, and see what happens. And then, we'll go ahead and do an autopsy without letting them know, or family members. So that was that. So this was a letter to the participants and how they were recruited. So some time ago, you were given a thorough examination, and since that time, we hope you have gotten a great deal for bad blood. So you will not be given your last chance to give a second examination. This examination is a very special examination, and after you finish, you will be given a special treatment if it is believed you are in a condition to stand it. So if I were to have syphilis and there was nothing around it, then of course I would say yes, right? So the experiment pretty much exhibited a racist nature. Syphilis, and this is just a quote from Dr. Moore. In 1972, the remaining survivors were treated. So this is after the experiment was shut down, as well as their family members, and after the news of the experiment was leaked by a whistleblower. So the whistleblower was Mr. Gluckson, who was a former employee of the United States Public Health Services. So, and he's the one who leaked this information to the Washington Star back in 1972, and became a very big issue in the U.S., especially among the African American community. And you guys know what's going on in 72, right? From 60s, 70s. They were still fighting for social change. So there was still this movement in the US. And when this thing broke out, so it created a lot of people. So the consequences, or what came out of this experiment. So back in 1974, the National Commission for the Protection of Human Subjects of Medical and Behavioral Research was implemented. From 80 to 93, the President's Commission for the Study of Ethical Problems in Medicine and Biomedical Behavior Research was implemented as well. In 95, the National Bioethics Advisory Commission as well. And back in 2001, the President's Council of Bioethics. So a lot of changes are happening, right? As you can see, it was after the 70s, 80s, 90s, even to 2000s. We're talking about like 20 years ago. Just think about how far we were back in 2001. We were still making changes to ethical changes. And outcomes for people, the subjects, well, many of them died. In 1972, 74 of the participants were alive. There were 40 wives infected and 19 children were born with syphilis. The NAPT filed a class action lawsuit against the federal government, and they were paid $9 million and agreed to provide medical treatment to surviving participants and their family. those who were infected by the disease. In 2004, the last Tuskegee participant died. In 2009, the last widow receiving THPP benefits died as well. So what are some ethical, critical unethical issues? It's number one, there are violation of constitutional rights, right, of the participants. If you don't follow the government behavior with the knowledge of syphilis, they still ignore it. PHS led the participants to believe that they were being properly treated when they were not. The PHS failed to obtain the participants' written consent to be part of the study, and they were racially motivated and discriminated against African American people. And there were no rules and regulation, right, governing the experiment. So they were just pretty much doing whatever they wanted, whatever they believed. All right, let's do this, let's do that. So what should have happened though? So participants, patients needed more information about their condition and the treatment, right? The standard treatment should have been controlled. The treatment should have been initiated after the cure was found as well. So when it comes to the research society, the research world, right? Scientists, what happened with something like this? Just let it happen. So what will be the outcome of this? There is a cost to society. There is a mistrust, right, in the medical system, in the government, right? So this is just pretty much a survey. I don't know if you can see it. It's a survey from 2003, was 20 years ago. And it's pretty much telling you, right, that there was this mistrust among, how the research was conducted among the people who were surveyed back in Oregon State University in Roanoke, who recruited us. So this is just some articles that you guys will be able to find on CAT courses that you guys can just, look through them and have an idea, some examples as to today's subject. Part two, it's pretty much our key elements when it comes to research. So research must be voluntary, right? Inform about aspects of research that might influence the decision to the participants and why they need informed consent. Well, it's pretty much protects the participant, let him know as to what role they will be playing, the aim of the research. And that should be to increase the trust and respect for the science. And it protects the researcher. If we go ahead and do research like we used to do back in the 70s, 60s, or even 80s, if we do that type of research right now, and if you don't inform consent, if you don't collect just their consent, you just get sued. If I were to be part of the UC and do research for that, they sue as well. They will come for every single dime we have. So it's important to go ahead and let participants know, right? So when do you need to inform the consent? When there's risk to subjects or asked to forfeit personal rights when there are lab studies, surveys, field surveys. No need if the data is already collected, which is known as secondary data if someone already collected it, or the data collection does not alter the lives of the participants, right? Which, for example, is just collecting neural samples. And you could use a primary when individual rights are threatened or cause and involved. This is just along this. Part number 3 is to go ahead and follow the privacy of the participants. Right. So you should let them know that will potentially be, they might feel that might be potentially embarrassing if some of the material gets leaked or something of that nature, right? So you have to assure participants that their information is sensitive and it will be kept private. Also, there's a setting being serve is that wherever the research will take place, you should let them know. An office, a lab, their place, right? And the dissemination of the information. What will happen after you collect the data? What will happen after you do the research? These are their personal views, right? Their personal thoughts. So what will happen to that? So you should also let the participant know about that. And do people know they are being observed? You should let them know about that as well. Part 4 is pretty much deception. The reason for deception is the methodological. It creates a fictional environment, and we also have what we call externality, validity. So which is the extent to which findings can be generalized from the lab to the real world. And pragmatic, which is limited time, right? Mining and access of private observations as well. So some of the problems with deception are that might become suspicious subject, right? Subjects can act differently on all type of experiment. You will not always get the same answers every time you do research. So like I said, there might be effects of suspiciousness, leakage of the research information to other subjects, the lasting effects even after debriefing. Ethical concerns, right? You can be lying in research when the goal is to go ahead and identify the truth. So it's harm to scientists, the guild, citizens, and bad for science. So these are some of the studies with human subjects, and this is what they should have is informed consent, right? You should collect their signature. You should provide information sheet. All participants must be treated with respect. All information must be kept private. All the information must be stored securely, and there should be no deception. No deception must be used. Have you guys ever heard of IRB? Do you guys know what IRB stands for? No. It's a so it's an internal review board, right? So every institution has an IRB, has an internal review. The UC has an IRB department. If you go ahead and do research among this from the federal government, you work for the federal government, they do have an IRB as well, and so on. So IRB is essential. And the IRB process is to pretty much show them what your research is all about, right? And where you're going to be conducting your research, to what kind of participants you're going to be reaching out to, and all the stuff that we just talked about. So case 1, let me give you guys an example, and we will identify the issue, the unethical part of it. So you have one case, let's say it's a clinical trial, and it's an experimental drug to prevent athlete's foot. The participants all have the athlete's foot. Half of them will be treated with standard cream, and half of them will be treated with a new cream. At the end of 2 weeks, they will check on the extent to which the athlete's foot has cleared up. Okay, keep that in mind. Okay, so you have an experimental group and a control group here. Just to test your knowledge. Who is part of the control group? Which half? Who's the control group and the experimental group? Sorry? Yeah, right. The standard cream is control group, because you're controlling it. And the experimental group is the one getting the new cream, right? It's like an experiment. So based on what we just read, for example, number 1, what are the risks to the participants? Right? Yeah. Maybe they were being very helpful. Hey, this is the cream I need it, so I'm hoping for this to work. But maybe they didn't, right? So what are the benefits to the participants? Anyone? Yeah, there's a hope, right? There's a hope that something better might just come out, right? And it might not take as long as the regular cream, right? This might be have a quick reaction, right? And might be maybe less itchy, let's say, for example, right? There's a benefit, right? And what are the ways that research could have mitigate any potential harms? Yeah, right. It's a new cream. What was it made of? Right? What are the side effects? What if it doesn't work and my Atlas food gets worse, right? There might be a side effect, right? And are there any ethical considerations? There should be, right? So you should always let the participants know as to what's going to happen throughout the case and what the outcome might be. So this happens a lot when it comes to patients with cancer, right? Um, there are a lot of type of cancer out there that do not have a treatment, and whenever there's a new treatment, you know, they recruit patients with cancer and they give them hope, right? There's a hope that this new treatment might fight back the cancer, but it might not at the same time, right? And there might be side effects to that as well. So case number 2, it's a clinical trial as well. It's for experimental drug to treat terminal cancer. Participants, they all have a terminal cancer. And so half will be treated with standard treatment and half will be treated with a new treatment. At the end of 2 months, they will assess the quality of life and expectancy. This is health economics. This is what I do. So what are the risks to the participants, benefits, the ways that research could mitigate, and any ethical considerations? It's pretty much to what we just talked about to the Atlas, right? Case, scenario 1. So there are risks to the new drug. The benefits, could cure the cancer, right? The new treatment. The ways that research could mitigate to any potential harms, and the ethical considerations, like let them know as to what they're about to face. Case number 3 is pretty much students, researchers are interested in how attractiveness of potential partner changes as the evening goes on. So goes into the researcher goes to the bar, 8 o'clock, let's say, service people, 10 p.m. again, and at 12 midnight again. Going back to these questions. So what's going on in this case? Let's say student researchers, right? They're just like, hey, let's see what's gonna happen. Read the case again. Tomorrow I wake up, I wanna do this study. Seems simple, right? Just follow people. Just go to the bar, go at night and see, you survey people. I'm pretty sure people might be like, okay, yeah, if they got nothing better to do, right? They're at a bar for a reason, right? So what are the rest of the participants? If I just go ahead and do that, what are the rest of the participants? If you're at a bar, let's play an example. Just imagine person X is at a bar, I'm person Y, drinking a beer, and I go, hey, I'm just doing this study, and I want to ask you a few questions. And a couple hours later, I'll come back again with the same questions. And at midnight, I come back with the same questions again. That's one, right? They at a bar drinking alcohol. I don't think you go to a bar and just like, hey, give me a glass of water, right? And drink water all night, right? You're at a bar for a reason, right? They're drinking alcohol, so that's not a good time to do research. The benefits to the participants, it might help my research, right? It's a new knowledge I'm creating that might go out there. What are the ways that the research could mitigate any potential harms? Yeah, maybe, hey, drinking from 8 o'clock till midnight, that's 4 hours of just drinking alcohol. I'm pretty sure you would not give me the best answers. You would not be, maybe you didn't even consent to, you didn't sign anything, right? I just approach you and I ask you, hey, I want to do I want to ask you a few questions. And that's it, right? So there are ethical considerations, right? That must happen when it comes to that. So let me show you guys an example when I talk about this. So this is my research study. So this study is pretty much ready to launch. So I will be launching it maybe today's what, Thursday, early next week. But this is the consent form, right? You provide entire information to the participant as to what's going on. I gave them the title of my study. Who's part of the study? Just me and Dr. Brown. So any questions that I might have, right? What is the purpose of the study? Let them know what the purpose of the study is. What will happen if they take part of the study? How many people will participate? How long would it take? Will their information will be kept private? Will they be compensated? What are the costs? Right? What are the risks? What are the benefits? Pay attention to the benefits since we're there. Can you just read it? You see it? Yeah, right. There are no direct benefits taking part in the study, right? However, the new knowledge gained from the survey may inform public policy and help you for the future. So I'm letting them know as to what the responses might be, right? What will influence. So they should be aware as to what's going to happen afterwards. Can they stop being in the study? Yes, they can. And any questions that they might have. I've given my name, I gave my personal cell phone number. You guys shouldn't have that, actually. And the consent form, right? And then after that, then I ask a question, do you agree to participate in this research study? Right? If they click, yes, I agree, they can start the survey. Either say no, they just drop out of the survey. Now, will they get any money or any compensation if they go through the first, they read the consent form and they say, no, I do not wish to be part of the study? Will they be compensated?
I think you have to, as long as you're like recruiting them. If they drop out, they self-compensate.
Yeah, right. Even if they just say yes, maybe, or just answer a question on, they're like, hey, you know what? I don't want to finish it. Just drop out of it. They still have to be compensated, right? Because that's what I told RB. Right. And if they don't get compensated, then they reach out to me or they reach out to RB. Right. So because I'm already promising something. So yeah, that's what happens. Are there any questions, comments when it comes to ethics? No?